Welcome to the second Latin America Research Conference. My name is Gledson EMIDIO. I'm the chair of the Brazilian chapter, and I will be your host today. In behalf of the Argentina, Chile, and the Brazil chapter, and the EURAXES, I would like to thank you all for joining us today for this meeting and for the 12 sessions of the conference. We are in our third day of the conference. We had also already 2 days of exciting events, and we have until Friday with several sessions. This is the second edition of the MCAA Latin America Conference. The first one was held in Buenos Aires in 2019, was hosted by the Argentina chapter. And this year the Brazil chapter is hosting the conference now with the addition of the Chile chapter that has recently joined us. This conference was planned to be happened last year, in the beginning of 2020, in Rio de Janeiro at Fiocruz, but unfortunately with the pandemic, we had to cancel it. 1 year has passed since the beginning of the restrictions caused by the pandemic, and unfortunately, we are living one of its saddest times, especially here in Brazil. Yesterday, 16th of March 2021, we lost almost 3,000 lives due to the COVID and also due to the negationism of science. So we are living sad moments, and we would like to offer our deepest sympathies to all the families and friends of people who have lost their lives to COVID. Science has never been more important. It's giving us hope, and it is showing that the countries that doesn't follow the sound scientific advice are the ones that are suffering most. We as the scientists, as the funders, as publishers, as institutions that work with science have an important role to play this time. And I think this conference is, one of its purpose is to discuss how we can improve the way we collaborate, with the way we run our scientific environment, the way we share our work. And during the next days, we will be discussing these. Today, we have a dedicated session to the science policy, where we'll be discussing research culture, how to have better and kinder research environments, more inclusive. And also later today, we have a very important roundtable on which kind of open science do we want. The pandemic has pushed forward and accelerated the implementation of open science. So it's very important for us to discuss which kind and for whom we want the open science. And Latin America has an important role on this, and together with the European initiatives, I think we can put the discussion forward. So I would like to also to welcome and to thank all the speakers and panelists and moderators that are helping today, especially in this session. We have today here the Mahikuhi Alumni Association Chair, Mostafa SHAWRAV, also the Ambassador to the European Commission, Ambassador IBAñEZ, and also the Professor BOURGUIGNON, who will be talking today about the European Research Council. So just a few announcements. We are recording this session, and the whole session will be available to anyone that could not attend today. And also, we are streaming this session on the Zoom webinar, but also on the YouTube channel of EURAXES. So you are welcome to join in over these posts. So with any further delay, I would like to invite our chair of the association, Mostafa Moonir, SHAWRAV, who is going to offer the MCAA welcoming. And Mostafa is supporting us, our Latin America chapters since the beginning, and he's a very strong voice to the empowerment of the association and to all our members. Just to remember, the Marie Curie Alumni Association represents fellows, former fellows, and present fellows of the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions, and which are one of the most prestigious funding schemes in Europe. So please, Mostafa, welcome to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gledson, for this introduction. I'm actually very, very honored to be here among the distinguished speakers of this session. As you mentioned, it's really sad today that we are sacrificing the human connection, the live interaction. But I hope that even at distance, this event will work as a platform for the researchers in Latin America to discuss the key topics and create meaningful connections. I mean, as you mentioned, I had the actually privilege to present and open the first MCAA Latin America conference in Buenos Aires, which was a two-day event, a fantastic event. And we have seen the collaborations from MCAA Argentina, MCAA Brazil chapter, with the Iraq's and Spanish embassy in Argentina, how a successful event could organize at that time. And today, you, together with the MCAA Chile chapter and Argentina chapter, is setting another example of this successful collaboration. I mean, if we look at today's changing global context, you can see that MCAA plays a vital role, representing over 19,000 members as of today from 143 countries. So we bring together experts, members from different research interests, culture, different geography in one network under one umbrella. So we debate, we discuss, we exchange ideas on topics affecting researchers' life. We try our best to contribute, shaping the future of science policy, provide career development opportunities for members as well as wider research community, and communicate with the relevant stakeholders. And as a region outside of Europe, MCAA Latin America community plays a very crucial role fulfilling this mission. Especially, it works as a bridge between researchers in Latin America and other parts of the Europe. I remember from my presence in the last event, I have seen how you support and extend the international collaboration among researchers, as well as strengthen the diplomatic relations between Europe and regional countries. So this is quite reflected also in today's program. So as I can see that this event will provide information on how to apply on the MSc applications under Horizon Europe. Also, there will be from Wellcome Trust and from Karen to sharing the best practices of the research cultures. At the same time, I'm glad that there is a session on open science. I was just talking before. Over the past year, I have got this feedback from the expert of open science that the open science infrastructure in Latin America is quite advanced. So I think this is an opportunity to interact with other parts of the world and make sure that we have a policy, we have a sustainable open science policy, which is a win-win situation for all stakeholders. And I'm also quite glad that Professor Jean-Pierre Bourguignon will be speaking today and talking about the impact of ERC and its research on researchers' life. So at this point, I would like to thank all of you, especially all the chairs, you, Gledson, Virginia, Alejandro, and also the past chairs of Argentina and Brazil chapter, Beth and Pablo, for their tremendous effort over the past years. And I'm really grateful to all the support, EURAXES Worldwide, EURAXES Latin America, and all the audience for joining here today in this time of crisis. But a very special thank to Charlotte who has been driving the activity of the chapter and the Latin America community over the past year. Charlotte, thank you very much for all your wonderful contributions over the years. So I wish all the participants a very great time in the conference, and which would be full of discussions and connections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mostafa, and thank you all for your support to the Latin America chapters and your very important role on this. Yeah, you are right. We have been supported very strongly by the EURACCESS Latin America. The Brazilian chapter and the Chile chapter started as a push from Charlotte and the EURACCESS team, and they play a very important role for the implementation, for the improving the awareness of the Marie Curie Sklodowska actions in Brazil. One of our main missions here is to improve this awareness of the MCAA Marie Sklodowska actions funding here in Brazil, and EURACCESS plays an important role. But also we have the support from CONFAP and also from the delegation of the European Commission, the European Union in Brazil, and especially from the Ambassador IBAñEZ, who is always supporting our ambition to improve the numbers and the participation of Latin America researchers in the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions. So I would like to invite, it's an honor to have here together with us the ambassador of the European Union in Brazil, Ambassador Ignacio IBAñEZ. So I would like to welcome and invite the ambassador to talk. Please, Ambassador, welcome.
Muito obrigado, Gledson. It's really a pleasure to participate in this second Latin American Marie Curie Alumni Association Research Conference. I would like to greet the organizers, the Alumni Association, and particularly Gledson EMIDIO, the Brazil chapter, but also Mostafa, Moonir, SHAWRAV, the MCAA Chair, and of course, always the support that we are getting from EURACCESS and here today in the person of Charlotte, and also all the other panelists of this welcoming session. A special salutation also to the President of the European Research Council, Professor Pierre Bourguignon. As you know, the Horizon 2020 was the largest international scientific cooperation program in the world, and now we are close to the adoption of the new framework program, Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe will evolve in the new financial framework of the European Union of the period 2021-2027, and will have a budget of 100,000 billion euros. The program will mark an evolution of something that has already been a great success. The Marie Sklodowska-Curie program is and will continue to be a key action within Horizon Europe. Brazil is one of the first countries of the Latin American regions in terms of participation, and together with Argentina and Chile, they are in the top 10 of the countries outside the European Union. In this sense, it is also worth to remark that MCAA allowed a brain circulation, reflecting a relatively balanced cooperation since 400 EU-based researchers visited Brazil organization, while around 520 Brazilian researchers went to Europe with funding of the MCSCA. All of these testify to the incredible dynamism of the Brazilian academic and scientific world, the deep ties between our societies, but also the good work of the teams that are in charge of promoting the program in the country. Thank you to all of them. I want to thank again the colleagues from EURACCESS for the important promotional work that they are carrying out. And we can do more in the future. And that is why we are here working with the alumni who are the best ambassadors of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions program. I hope that this information day, with several tables on topics relevant to the European research area, but also to the Brazilian and Latin American scientific communities, for instance, on topics as open science, funding, geodiversity, women in science, among others, can be useful and interesting for everyone. Thank you, and please count on us always to keep developing this relation. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the kind words. In fact, we can do more, and we are trying our best to integrate and to collaborate with other institutions to advance the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions in Latin America. And especially now with this, we have funding crisis in Latin America. It's always good to emphasize that applying to this funding and going abroad, it's a great thing for the careers of the researchers, but also for the countries, since brain circulation has a really positive impact for the home countries as well. So many thanks for participating. Our professor, the ERC, the European Research Council, is it's a funding, a very prestigious funding for basic research, and last week we had the MCAA North American chapter organized a session. It was called like upgrading MCSA. And I find it funny, and I think it reflected very well what it is. All the most ambitious Marie Curie fellows, they want they dream about the ERC funding, which is quite competitive and prestigious, and it's a very important tool for advancing science and basic research. And I think this speech by the Professor Bourguignon came at hand at the moment, and due to the importance of the next step for them, the Marie Curie fellows that want to pursue excellence research abroad. So I would like to invite, we are very honored to have Professor Bourguignon here, the interim president of the European Research Council. And Professor Bourguignon is going to present European Research Council open to the world, and we are very happy and glad to hear Professor Bourguignon. Please welcome Professor Bourguignon. Professor Bourguignon, welcome to the session, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very honored to be able to speak. I'm very grateful to the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Alumni Association, but I'm also very pleased to see His Excellency Ambassador IBAñEZ here. We got great support when visited Brazil, and also great support from the Euraccess group, Charlotte in particular. And I'm very glad also to have developed now a very personal relation also with Mostafa SHAWRAV. So I'm very honored to be here and to be given the possibility of presenting the European Research Council. So let me start with my presentation. And it was already said, the European Research Council is just one component, next please, of the framework program of the European Commission. So it was in Horizon 2020, and it will be in Horizon Europe. Actually, the Scientific Council really pushed for continuity between the two. So the new ERC will be very similar to the ERC which just finished last year. But that was exactly what we wished. Next slide, please. So in a sense, the ERC was given really a very specific mission. And the mission was to raise the level, dynamism, and creativity of the whole European research system, and with the idea of supporting the emergence of research leaders, improving career prospects of early stage researchers, and also at the same time providing a benchmark for all of Europe's national research authorities and individual institutions. And I think, of course, the ERC was created in 2007, but I think one can say that this mission has been really fulfilled over the years. And we are very pleased and actually very satisfied that in the next framework program, which starts right now, Horizon Europe, really the ERC is given the means to continue this development. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, there is a scientific governance, which is very original in the scientific, in the framework program of the European Commission, in the sense that it is governed by an independent scientific council, 22 members, which have the honor of chairing. And this council has really the full authority on deciding how to organize the funding, but also to organize the evaluation. Next. And of course, in order to do that, you will see the size of ERC is quite big. It is supported by a dedicated implementation structure, which is an executive agency, which now has typically 500 agents, and which I must say, I'm already a senior scientist. It's the most amazing organization I've ever seen. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? The strategy is very clear. So we all our decisions are based on scientific quality alone. That's the only criteria for selection. Next, please. We support individual scientists mostly. I will explain in a minute how we do that. And in particular, we are totally open to any proposal by the scientists, but now scientists know that they need to be ambitious if they submit a project to ERC. And we are supporting frontier research. And it's very important for us that we don't call it just basic or applied research. We really are looking for research which has the ambition of really being groundbreaking. But we do also support some applied research. And of course, we are relying a lot on peer review, international peer review. In our panels, more than 15% of the members are non-Europeans. We have a number of people from Latin America, from Argentina, from Chile, from Brazil. And so we are grateful to all the scientists to help us. Next slide, please. So what made the ERC successful? I think it's just a combination of things. First of all, that we apply the principle of bottom-up absolutely strictly, which means that the researchers who come to us, they will be, the work they are going to propose is to be completely of their choice. And they organize the work they want to do exactly as they want to do it. So that's, again, totally in their hands. The amount of money that the ERC provides, as you will see in a minute, is quite substantial. So it gives truly financial autonomy. And it also allows the researchers to negotiate with the institution, good conditions to work. And what we have seen over the years is the capacity of ERC teams to really attract top team members from all around the world. And I will mention that. And another thing which for us is extremely important is the fact that we empower the researchers by what we call portability of grants, which really makes them, although we sign the contract with an institution, to decide to move if they feel that they don't get the appropriate support or if they have other opportunities. And in the end, what we have seen over the years also is the fact that getting an ERC grant allows you to attract additional funding and getting recognition. Next, please. So here is the present Scientific Council. So as I mentioned, 22 members. In the first row next to me, there are the 3 vice presidents who are each one of them covering what we call the domain. So the domains are physical science engineering and life sciences and social science humanities. And all these people are there in Intuitu Personae. They are coming from many different countries, many different backgrounds. You see, I'm very pleased that the presence of women is really very considerable, actually larger than the presence of women in the scientific community overall. And that's something extremely good. Next, please. So what are well, why can we say that it's a success story? Very soon we will reach 10,000 grantees. We have already given more than 10,000 grants, since a few people got more than one grant. Extremely many of them are at an early career stage. So in the sense, it's very adequate that we speak in this MCAA conference, and many nationalities. So that's why the subtitle of my presentation was Open to the World, because we are definitely welcoming people from many different nationalities. We know it's highly competitive. In recent years, the success rate has been around 12%. We hope with the new budget, we can reach 15%, which was really considered for us as the absolute minimum target. It depends very much on how many people are going to apply. The number of institutions which have received the ERC grants is over 800. So it's very many in 34 countries. And it has definitely a benchmarking effect. Next, please. So the grants we gave are so-called starting grants, 2 to 7 years of the PhD, consolidated grants, 7 to 12 years of the PhD, and the advanced grants, meaning people already more advanced in their career. I mentioned that these are individual grants where people can organize the work around them, but they're also synergy grants, which are slightly different in the sense that 2 to 4 people can work together and really organize truly synergetic projects. We have also a smaller program called Proof of Concept to really make it easier for researchers supported by the ERC if they want to get closer to the market or to societal needs. Next, please. So just to show you that we are trying to cover all fields. So these are just a list of panels that we have organized, 27 now for starting this year. We added one more panel in the physical science engineering, which is called materials engineering. Actually, it's not exactly an addition because we just reorganized the panels to really balance the fields. Also a new panel in social sciences humanities called human mobility, environment and space. And the same happened there. It meant that we reorganized the panels quite a bit. Next, please. So a good proof of the priority to young scientists is to look at the age distribution of people who got an ERC grant. And you see on this chart on the left, which is the number of ERC grantees per age. And you see that there is a peak around 35. And then this is after 35, a decreasing number of ERC grantees per age. And of course, if you look at the younger ones, clearly they do represent, as I mentioned, about 2/3 of all our grants. In concerning the team members, and again, it's completely at the initiative of the researchers, you see that many of them are postdocs, but also doctoral researchers. So next one, please. So the numbers, very important, is the number of PhD and postdocs that we support is more than 50,000 of them. So in the countries, of course, it's not at all uniformly distributed for good reason. Countries in Europe have different sizes. And of course, some countries are more successful than others. The UK is the UK presently with the largest number of ERC grants. Of course, now the UK becomes an associated country. It's not anymore a member of the European Union. But you see that some smaller countries are remarkably successful, like Netherlands, Switzerland, Israel, and also Belgium or Sweden. Their number of grantees per million inhabitants is actually much larger than Germany or France. Next, please. So just to give you some measurement of how ERC is open to the world, 88% of ERC grantees and 17% of ERC team members are nationals of countries outside the European Union and associated countries. And of course, in order to encourage people to really settle in Europe, we have additional funding, which actually can be very significant, because on top of the regular grant, you can get a startup cost covered up to €1 million, which is a very significant. And also another feature which shows our determination to be open to the world is the fact that you can keep a dual affiliation with another institution, provided you're affiliated with a European institution for at least 50% of your time. In the case of the synergy scheme, which I mentioned, actually one of the 2, 3, or 4 which are receiving the grant in a synergy can be actually based completely outside Europe and without requesting from the country where the person is to get extra fund. Next one. So this gives you the figures altogether, the people who are coming from outside the European research area, getting ERC grants. So it's almost 1,000 such people. Not surprisingly, the largest number is coming from the US, but also Canada, India, Russia, Australia, and so on. You see none of them in the largest numbers are actually countries from Latin America, but I hope this will change. Next. So in Latin America, let me give you the figures. Next, please. Yeah, very good. So these are the people who got these grants, and you see that quite a number of them are actually from the starting grants, the younger ones, which quite a number of them, I'm sure, have been before that Marie Sklodowska-Curie grantees or fellows. And so this gives you the overall numbers. So 57, which if you compare to 10,000, is a very small number. So it was very appropriate that we have the opportunity to describe what is done. Next, please. So another element we have to actually prepare for this willingness of people to come to Europe is also these so-called implementing arrangements. And we are just showing here these arrangements make it possible for people from countries outside the European research area to visit ERC teams. And I'm very pleased that we did sign in recent years a number of grants of such agreements with the countries in Latin America, with Brazil, with Argentina, also with Mexico. And I must say that it's remarkable the number of Brazilians now who are taking advantage of this implementing arrangement. So I hope this will develop further, and we will have other grantees, other visitors taking advantage of the implementing arrangement. By the way, I should mention that one of the scientists who took advantage of the synergy is based in Chile. So it's very good to see that the Synergy program definitely includes not only North Americans, but also people from other parts of Europe, in particular from South America. So these are the typical two figures, very important. That is the willingness or the interest of ERC grantees to host visitors. And you see that this number is huge. In average per country, it's we have among our grantees more than 600 of them who are interested in hosting visitors. So this is in a sense the offer of possible visits. Next, please, is the number of people who took advantage of these visits. And so you see the remarkable position of Brazil, which is ahead even of China or ahead of Japan. And so the only country which is doing better is South Korea. But you know how eager South Koreans are to connect with the rest of the world. Next, please. So I'm finishing with a new perspective. So I present you something that probably some of you know already, which is the structure of the program. As Ambassador IBAñEZ told us, this program is very soon going to be voted. I think it was even voted by the council yesterday, and the parliament should give the final vote. We hope it would be at the end of March. It looks it will be more in April, but of course it's coming. Negotiations are finished. We just are in the final lane of getting all the legal details completely hammered out. And so this program has 3 pillars. One pillar is very similar to the pillar of Horizon 2020 called Excellent Science, Pillar 1, in which you find the ERC, you find the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions, and you find the infrastructures. Pillar 2 is more or less what was in Horizon 2020, Pillar 2 and 3. That is a conjunction of the global challenges and industrial competitiveness, with a few new creations, so some clusters on very priority topics, but also a new tool, which is called the missions, 5 missions, which are to be launched very soon, and which I think could be an interesting way of mixing bottom-up and top-down research. And Pillar 3, which is really a creation which was very much, I mean, the initiative of Commissioner Moedas, who was the previous commissioner. And the idea was to pull under PRIDA 3 all instruments which have to do with really triggering innovation in Europe, with in particular the creation of the European Innovation Council, copied after the European Research Council, and with which we try to cooperate as much as we can. And of course, it's very different. It's about innovation, in particular, including also the possibility of providing capital, seed money for companies, and so on. So this is the 3 pillars. There is also an horizontal pillar, very important, much larger this time than last time, which is called the widening participation and strengthening the European research area, and which probably will have more programs than in the past. They were basically called twinning and teaming. And I hope they will, since there is more money, I'm sure there will be new initiatives under this horizontal program, which really affects all the other pillars. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Here you have all the data. If you want to reach out to the ERC, our website contains a lot of information. We are present on all the social media, and also a number of national contact points are very active, in particular the Brazilian one. And therefore, I thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope many of you will be applying to the ERC, and we will have opportunity to work together in the future. And thanks again to the MCAA Latin America chapter for the invitation.
Many thanks, Professor Bourguignon. It is really remarkable the amount of support the ERC gives to the excellent researchers around the globe. And I'm very happy to see that the participation of Latin America is starting to improve. And especially, I was very glad to see the implementation arrangements that they are an excellent way of getting in contact with the European ERC fellows around the globe. And it is a thing that we can take advantage here in Latin America. Just to remember as well that in Brazil, we have the national contact point, Professor Moacir from University of São Paulo, Moacir Martucci. And in Argentina, we have the Oficina de Enlace, EU, European Union, Argentina. And I think most of the few countries have also a national contact point that they can help giving information and also supporting applications. So we truly hope Marie Curie Sklodowska fellows and not fellows as well can take advantage and start planning their applications for the ERC. So I would like to thank Professor Bourguignon for participating. It was really an honor. Also would like to thank the Ambassador Ignacio IBAñEZ for joining us today, and for the Mostafa SHAWRAV for joining us. It was really a pleasure to have you all here. And we here, the Latin America chapters are always open to collaboration and to support and to help on the mission of the European Union and the ERC in Brazil, in the Latin America. We are now closing this first session, and we are going to our keynote speech by on research culture. Research culture, it's a very dear theme for us here at the Brazilian chapter, and for MCAA in general. We have our policy working group at Marie Curie Alumni Association that is working strongly on research culture, on how to improve our research environments, on to have a kind of more inclusive science and how to do it. And we are very honored to have here Ben Bleasdale, who is a policy officer at the Wellcome Trust, who is giving us a welcome speech, a keynote speech. But also, I would like to thank Karen STROOBANTS, who is a board member of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and she is also founder of the MetisTalk, and she works. She has on a strong work, an extensive dedication to the research culture in the institutions that she worked, and she's helping to advance this discussion on the Marie Curie Alumni Association. So I would like to invite her to give us to chair this session and to give us her thoughts about on research culture, and after that, Ben Bleasdale will start his keynote. So thank you very much for all, and please, Karen, the floor is yours. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Gledson. So the first thing to say is really, I'm delighted to be here today. And you know, as Gledson already said, I was asked not only to introduce Ben today and to guide the session, but also to just give a very quick preamble on research culture. And I think the first thing to cover is what is research culture, because I do think, as Gledson said, we are reaching more people, but not everyone is aware yet of what it is and why we're talking about it. And I have a bit of a bias to go back to the definition that was first coined, I think, by the Nuffield Council for Bioethics and the Royal Society, who I think kicked off some of the discussions. And they defined it as research culture as encompassing the behaviors, the values, the expectations, attitudes and norms of our research communities. And so this influences researchers' career paths, but also determines the way in which research is conducted and communicated. And so what that means in summary is that we're really talking about how research is being done, how we behave when we do research, and how we behave towards others in the research landscape. And so the second question is really why are we talking about this today, but also just in general, there's lots of discussions going on about this topic. And I want to come back to what Gledson said in the beginning, in this pandemic, and I think in general, science is really giving us hope. And I believe that the people who started to talk about research culture are people who are really passionate about what science can do for society, but who have seen that there are some concerns around the culture in our research environments, and that those aren't really supporting researchers currently to always reach their full potential. And so where some of these discussions in the UK have started off with the work of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics and the Royal Society, I think it's fair to say that in the last few years, the Wellcome Trust has really taken this to the next level with the largest survey on the topic at that point in the UK, but also with just taking the discussion to universities and talking to a lot of researchers in the UK. And I would arguably say far beyond that. And I think being here today and talking about the topic is testament for that reach that has had. So research culture includes a lot of concepts that we're maybe more familiar with, like inclusion and diversity, open science, ethics, and research integrity. And I think what research culture programs are trying to do is really look at these things more holistically, because they are linked. And I think there is already consensus around the fact that a lot of problems in all these areas and a lot of barriers in all these areas are related to the way we assess research and researchers and the narrow definitions that we still have in research environments. And Wellcome has also pointed out things around the importance of teamwork and recognizing that, the importance of good leadership, and again, recognizing that. And so before I hand over to Ben to kind of go into a lot more detail on the Wellcome campaign, I just wanted to share a quick three points and reflections of myself on the Wellcome Trust Reimagine Research campaign. I think the first thing is around evidence. I think what that campaign has given us is a wealth of evidence via that large survey that has really supported us to bring this to the agenda. And that brings me to the second point, which is reach. I think together with some of the other efforts I've mentioned, the Wellcome Trust campaign, the Reimagine Research campaign has really brought this on the political agenda, but also on the mind of researchers. I think more than probably efforts before has been able to do. And then third, I think what's also important to mention is that based on the insights, the Wellcome Trust is not only recommending people to discuss and to think about ideas for change, but is also really looking in-house to their own policies and their own strategy and implementing some of the learnings to how they do things themselves. And I think that is something we can really all learn from. And with that, before handing over to Ben, I still want to just note at this point, please ask questions throughout the session. We'll be following the questions, and I'll be really looking out for interesting and new ideas maybe as well that are mentioned in those questions and comments. And with that, I want to really introduce now Ben Bleasdale, who I really have known quite well, I think, throughout his work on this campaign. He's a senior policy and advocacy advisor at Wellcome Trust. And I know very well how knowledgeable he is, but also how actively he's been influencing the factors that support good science. And these include funding, research funding and government investment, but also, and most importantly today, all the efforts that he has been driving with Wellcome Trust on improving research culture. And so without further ado, Ben, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Karen. And it's a real pleasure to come and speak to everybody today about this topic. It's, as Karen said, it's something that Wellcome Trust has put a lot of energy into recently, and we're very keen to share what we've learned and crucially what we're going to do next. So as Karen said, our Reimagine Research campaign has very much been trying to take a strategic approach to changing culture, recognizing the fact that Wellcome as a funder has a responsibility in how we act and how we give money away, and that has an influence on the environment, the working environment in which people work. So our work very much began about 18 months ago on this one, and I wanted to come back to this particular word as a way of framing the whole presentation really, which is this sense of excellence. And it's a word that if you visit Wellcome's website and you look at our grant forms, it's everywhere, you'll find it everywhere. We fund excellent science. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to go out there and fund brilliant, brilliant science that's happening. The challenge is that we never actually express what excellence means. We never define it. We never give people guidance on how to live up to that challenge and to deliver an excellent proposal. And very understandably, when the research community come to us, they have interpreted that often as meaning what you produce. So, you know, whether that's the papers that you output, it's the publication record that you have, it's your H-index, it's the patents that you've gathered. People really turn to those quite tangible outputs of research and say, this is what Wellcome think is excellent. This is what I will show them. And this whole campaign has been about trying to think about how Wellcome can be more clear about the broader sense of excellence, and particularly the point that Karen made, which is it's not just the what you've produced, it's how you've got there as well that really matters to us. And recognizing that that what and the how can't compensate for each other. You need both of them to be a brilliant scientist, and you need both of them to make a brilliant impact on the world. So throughout this presentation, you'll see that I try to draw us back to that sense of how do we become better at defining what excellence is, assessing that, rewarding it, and making sure that people can contribute to research in lots of different ways. So as a very brief introduction to Wellcome Trust, just in case you're not familiar with us, we're an independent charitable foundation. So we fund research across the world in over 70 countries. Although we're based in the UK, we do have an international presence and an international focus in what we fund in terms of research and health challenges. This funding is done through an endowment, so we are kind of free from political pressures and fundraising pressures. So it does give us extra freedoms, which also come with extra responsibilities to think carefully about how we're acting. And I think the point to talk about and why Wellcome cares about research culture is that we fund thousands of scientists, also innovators, educators, artists across the world. Each year we give away around $1.5 billion US dollars of funding. So we support a lot of people, and we're very aware that we pursue our mission through them. You know, that is how we achieve what we set out to do as a charity. And if we aren't thinking carefully about the working environment of those individuals and that they're able to thrive, then we ourselves can't achieve our charitable objectives. So that's very much why we care about culture, is because we pursue our mission and we succeed through the work of others. Now, we started the Reimagine Research campaign about 18 months ago now with an article from our director, Jeremy Farah. Jeremy is a researcher himself. He's had a long career both in the UK and working abroad. And he spoke about that he saw warning lights on the dashboard of the research community as he saw it, saying that some of the things that he'd valued most and enjoyed the most in his career were increasingly hard to access for people earlier on in their careers. And also some things that he saw as very concerning factors, behaviors, practices, things that were becoming the norm, which he felt were just unsustainable as a practice in research. And so he challenged the whole organization to say, let's think about how we can change the way we operate as a funder to not just fund great science, but fund a better way of doing it as well. So we began the process by collecting evidence. We really wanted to understand what the research community's experience of the current culture was, how that varied in different disciplines, in different institutions, in different countries. And we set about with a survey, which we sent out into the field about a year ago now, and we're delighted to get over 4,000 responses from across the world of people sharing their insights specifically about their experience of different types of working environments, different aspects of the culture, and also their hopes for the future and what they would like to change. And we knew it was important that Wellcome didn't just set out and begin to kind of enact what we thought was the right decision. We wanted to make sure that we were listening to what the community needed us to do. So it's nice to walk you through a few of the findings, but I would encourage you to go and see the report, which is on our website, which has an enormous amount of data to share on this, which I hope others can learn from as well. So the headlines I wanted to share today, there's 4 kind of key themes, but to start with, it was nice to find some really positive things in there. So researchers told us how proud they were to work in the field, how much a sense of passion drove what they did. And I think it's fair to say that it's a very unusual career path. You know, I came through a research lab myself, and I'm fully aware of the drive and the passion that people put into their research careers. So we're very conscious of making use of that and treating that responsibly, and not, as has been the case in the past, I think, sometimes drawing on that and abusing that passion as a way of getting people to work beyond what's reasonable and what's sustainable. But there were very concerning undercurrents in what we heard from researchers, a lack of sense of security about building careers. And so it's really important that we think carefully about how we change things in the current system to influence the problems that are actually there. So the 4 themes, just to run through them quickly for you. The first one was around the environment and around the sense of competition and the effects of that competition. And people spoke about competition being a positive thing generally in research, and this idea of kind of pushing people to go further and be at their best. But a lot of researchers told us that they felt actually the competition level had gone beyond that and into this kind of hyper-competitive state that actually became a detriment to the whole system. It wasn't driving people to be at their best, it was actually crushing people in order to kind of carry on. And that actually it was creating unkind, aggressive conditions which didn't foster collegiality, didn't encourage collaboration, and that actually eventually undermined the whole point of trying to drive people forward. And we heard a lot about the worrying manifestations of that pressure feeding down onto individuals, a huge number of people saying they'd experienced bullying, harassment in the workplace, and incredibly worrying statistics of over half of researchers saying that they'd sought or wanted to seek professional help for depression and anxiety. If you look at other high pressure careers, so kind of frontline doctors and nurses, the stats don't come even close to this. These are quite extraordinary numbers, and really made us sit up and say that this isn't sustainable. You can't be working in a system where that many people feel they're working in crisis mode. Secondly, and this probably goes without saying, but it was helpful for us to have the granularity of the data, was that people's experiences differ hugely on what they see as research culture. A lot of data that had been collected in the past was aggregated, and you average out some of the experiences, but actually we found that particularly women and some minority groups have a very, very different experience of moving through a career path, far greater prevalence of experience of bullying, harassment, a sense of, not being heard in the system if they do raise complaints, and that kind of seeking help for depression and anxiety at a much greater rate. So we've been very conscious with the data to make sure that we think about the interventions being tailored for different groups and making sure that we support those who are having the hardest time in the current culture. And speaking to those who've often had a better time and explaining why their experience in their head might not match what they're hearing from the data. Thirdly, it's very much about the kind of quality of the research being produced itself. We heard that the current pressures are favouring quantity over quality, and also stifling some of the principles that we all think sit at the core of great science. So particularly things like creativity, the vast majority of people said that they felt the current system didn't reward that. And yet, if you ask a funder, if you ask a researcher, they'll all say creativity is good. We want creativity. So there must be something wrong in the system that we're accidentally working against that. We also heard that this sense of pressure to produce results and papers is being felt by junior researchers who, a small minority there are feeling pressure to steer results in a particular direction, which isn't serving anyone's purposes. And the sense that the current metrics of success, so the things that we'd all recognize as tokens of a successful research career, whether that's your Nature paper or a patent, all these sorts of things that carry currency globally, people felt that they weren't having a positive impact on culture and that there was too much reliance on a very narrow set of success measures. And then finally, we heard an enormous amount about supervision and management within the research environment, and the idea that at the moment the structures of management aren't encouraging really great supervision and encouraging people to invest in others. Someone very rightly said to us that at the moment you don't succeed through others in science, you succeed on your own. And Wellcome perpetuates that. When we ask for a person to come forward for a grant for an entire team, we place the PI or the principal investigator at the center of that. They are the proxy for a whole team's worth of work. So we need to be more conscious of the fact that actually it is teams that deliver an enormous amount of research. How do we better value that? How do we better assess that and recognize it as a funder? And also then make sure that those researchers who are managing and supervising are given the support to do that. And too often we know that people end up in those roles just because that's the only way you can progress your career. And you have no support and you don't feel that you can turn to Wellcome as your funder and say, I need a little bit more support on this. So we want to make sure that Wellcome is being there to be more of an active supporter of those who are taking on supervisory roles and make sure that they have that support to do it really well and make that as a contribution to research as a whole. We took away all the results from the survey, incredibly helpful, but we really wanted to then unpack them in more detail with individuals across the research environment in the UK. We hosted a whole series of events called town halls, which were kind of discussion events across the UK, hosted at local universities, bringing in other institutions from nearby. Through this, we spoke directly to over 760 people. Each of those rooms was filled with a whole different array of people from the research community. So it wasn't just researchers, it was technicians, it was support staff, admin staff from the university. We said it was anyone who makes research happen is who we wanted to hear from. And that was incredibly helpful, I think, in getting a sense of where the problems were in the system and who was experiencing them. And also showing that the voices beyond just researchers are valued. We had a person who was an admin member of staff at one of these universities saying that in the 10 years that they'd worked at the university, they'd never been asked their opinion on how research funding worked. And this was the first time anyone invited them to anything. So I think it's important to think about inclusivity in that sense to get better data and get a better outcome as well. I would encourage you again to kind of go and have a look at the report that we published. We collated all the data. That came together as 12 themes of problems that people wanted us to think about. I won't go through those today. They'll be very familiar to those of you who've experienced the research environment, but it was helpful to hear how they all connect together. I think the crucial thing that I took away from those town halls in particular was the very personal experiences of these things. It's easy sometimes to forget that behind the statistic, behind the number 2 theme label is actually a person, a whole group of people's experiences. And we were able to talk to people, sit down with them and actually hear how it had affected their lives and their decisions and the things that they regretted. And I think that left us with a real sense of priority to get this changed, because we realized we were taking advantage of people's passion for the job and relying on them carrying an enormous amount of the risks of having a career in research when that should be shared equally between the people involved. And then the other way we managed to engage people was through these cafe culture packs. And these were effectively a kind of town hall session in a box that you could write off to Wellcome for. We send it to you in a post and you would sit around the coffee table with 5 or 6 colleagues. Eventually we did it virtually as well after the pandemic began, so that people could in a structured way unpack their own personal experience of culture. And the whole thing was arranged like a board game to make you think about it in steps. So you identified problems that you'd seen or experienced yourself. And then you thought about the ideas for changing that, what was driving it, how could you influence that? And then crucially, who needs to act in the system? You know, is it funders? Is it publishers, institutions? Is it researchers themselves? And the nice thing is that we sent over 500 of these kits across the world, actually, lots of them in the UK, and invited people to collate those ideas that they came up with their colleagues and send them in. And we've collected them all online at this open forum that you can visit, where people have been sharing their thoughts for things that should change, for stuff that needs to be fixed. And others coming in and saying, oh, we came up with that idea too, but we had this perspective on it. And it's been really wonderful seeing people growing and sharing comments and ideas for how to get things changed. This has become a wonderful resource for Wellcome, but also something we've been sharing with other funders and institutions around the world to say, if you want to see what the community think we should start with, come here. And finally, we also tried to reach out to those who have long been advocates of improving research culture and have often been quietly getting on with it in their own local environment against the flow of the system, and really persevered to make a change. And we were delighted to have a whole series of online profiles where we could help provide a platform for those who've been just getting on with changing things. And people like Chris Jackson at Imperial in London, talking about how he's changed his own lab environment and those who work for him to create a better environment, a better culture for them. And I think that sense of feasibility has been really valuable to say to people, yes, this is a huge problem, but there is something that you can all do as an individual to help change the system around us. So to wrap up, I think it's worth just thinking, with all that evidence that we've collected, it's important that we can begin to specify what we're aiming for with all of this work. Through the whole process that I've just described, we also asked people one simple question, which is, what does a really good environment look like in research? And almost everybody has an environment that they've been in, that they've thrived, that they really enjoyed. And we asked them to tell us what were the principles, what the features of that place that was so good, that made it so important to you. And we've been condensing those. You can see some of the feedback we got in the word cloud there, but we've been condensing those into a vision or a set of goals that describe where would the community like to be 10 years, 15 years from now, so that we can hold ourselves to account. So when we begin to make changes, we can go back to those goals that are written down and say, are we helping? Are we getting towards them? Or are we confusing something in the way, and even with good motivations and intentions, not having the impact we want? So I think having that scientific approach, really, of setting a goal and then trying to work towards it and seeing what works and evaluating it. And in that sense, I think following that kind of sustainable development goal model is a really helpful way of making the culture challenge feel more tangible to individuals. We've also, as Karen said at the start, been able to kind of build on the work of others and keep momentum behind this change within the UK in particular. And I think it's worth just reflecting on those kind of 4 ways that have really helped us achieve this. One is we've been really open with the evidence we've collected. We've published everything we've got. We've tried to share the raw data where possible, as long as anonymity is protected. And we're really keen for others to kind of analyze and comment back to us and correct us where we're wrong. So our hope is that having the evidence out there will help others make progress too. We've worked with and learned from other leading advocates across the community. Karen is far too humble to tell you that she is very much one of those. And she and others across the system, you know, we've mentioned the Nuffield Council, the Royal Society, have really led the way in getting this topic onto the conversation. And it's been allowed Wellcome to come in and use our role as a funder specifically to push things forward. So I think being able to recognise that Wellcome was not the first one to this party, and building on the things that other people have learned and built already has been really helpful for Wellcome to get a strong start. We've also then pushed for political commitment, knowing that an enormous amount of research funding in the UK is government funded. And I'm pleased to say that the 2 people there on the right, who are the previous 2 science ministers, including the current one, Amanda Soloway, who's at the bottom there, really get this project and have actually really committed to the government taking a stand on pushing forward culture as a priority. So I think having that license to operate has really changed the game as well. And then finally, we've accepted that this is a long-term process. You know, our director, Jeremy, said at the beginning, this isn't something we're going to fix overnight. It's not something we're going to fix in a couple of years. It's something Wellcome is going to commit to doing forever from now onwards, and making sure that we've really kind of accepted that and will live up to that, I hope, in the years ahead. So in terms of just kind of clarifying what Wellcome is going to be doing, we are in the process now of actually fundamentally redesigning the whole operation of Wellcome as a funder. We are replacing all of our funding schemes with new ones. All of that is designed to put culture at the very heart of our schemes. We could have tinkered around the edges, but we actually wanted to start with a clean slate. And in doing so, we hope that we can build a system that has culture, incentives, and all the right things at the base of it, and that people don't feel that this is an add-on or another thing to kind of achieve, another box to tick. And our hope is to approach that through 3 different levers. We want to make sure that we're clear about what we require. So what does Wellcome expect when we offer a grant or fund an institution? Setting the red lines that say this is the minimum that we expect. But crucially, we don't want to just leave it at that. We want to make sure that people aren't just encouraged to be adequate, but actually are encouraged to aspire to something much greater. And therefore, we'll put rewards in place that say, we will assess how great you are at contributing to these different factors. And if you're doing really well, we're going to reward you. We're going to give you the grant. We're going to see that as a really good contribution. So building the right incentives into how we fund as well is going to be key to getting that aspirational approach within the sector. And then finally, offering support that gets people between those two places. So how do we make sure that support isn't that tick box exercise of here's a management course that you have to go on, tick the box, and we won't ask any more questions. We really want that support to be tailored to what people need, and that they can come to us as a funder and say, look, I need extra support to do this. I need to improve my skills on supervision or whatever it is. And we will work with them to find what they need to do that. So just to finally wrap up, I've given you kind of a whistle-stop tour of the program today, but if you are keen to learn more, it's the perfect moment. We have got the kind of culmination of a year and a half of this listening mode next week in our Reimagine Research Festival. It's a week-long set of content from people across the whole of the sector. We've got international people, UK people, talking about their perceptions of culture, what they've heard from our work, and what they want to happen. What do they want Wellcome to do? What are the practicalities of getting some of these changes in place? How do you fund teams better? How do you build a team-based prize? How do you experiment with some of these things without disrupting people's careers and putting them at jeopardy? I think we'll have some really interesting practical conversations. So it's free, it's online. If you Google Reimagine Research Festival, it's the top link, and it's all on demand, so it's easier to work around time zones. And please do, if you have a chance, come and join in next week. We'd love to have you there. We've got over 1,000 people signed up, so we're really looking forward to it. And on that, I will say thank you very much and hand back to Karen.
Thank you, Ben. And I, for one, will be there next week. So that's the first thing to say. I already have a few questions coming in. I first want to pose one related to the political momentum you talked about, because I think you've probably been a bit too humble. There's actually a strategy coming up from the responsible department in the UK that explicitly includes culture, which I think is a great achievement for the reach that these campaigns have reached. And I'm going to ask a kind of a double question on that. So I think the first one is, what is, in your opinion, the role of this upcoming people and culture strategy at the government level, and maybe by extension, the role that governments can play? But, being conscious, our main audience here are individual researchers, I would immediately counter with, and what is the role of individual researchers? What can they do? Because I think those are almost the opposites of the spectrum, but I think it's interesting to hear about both.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, as you say, we've got this kind of culture strategy looming on the horizon quite soon. And our hopes is that it will be a way of setting out what the whole of the sector or the research sector should be looking towards as good practice. What should we be aiming for? So that sense of the kind of goals that I've described, I think being able to find an agreed set of those that work across disciplines, across institutions, and hopefully have similarities internationally, even if they're not exactly the same, I think that will allow people to avoid getting stuck for being a good contributor to culture. So we've spoken before about this idea of like the first mover disadvantage, that the first person to kind of do this suddenly is less competitive perhaps for funding elsewhere. So I think getting government to set out a top level sense of what should the community be aspiring towards is a way of making sure that all of the different funders and institutions start to move in the same direction, and you don't get individual researchers missing out because they actually chose to take the initiative and begin to make a contribution. So that's my hope for the kind of government's approach in the UK. And I think that sort of model works quite nicely as well for other places around the world, of having that, setting out the kind of broad ambitions and then leaving institutions and individuals to fill in the gaps and know locally what's the best way to reach those goals. Where institutions have different strengths, they're better at some things than others. How do they use those strengths to kind of pursue certain areas and then fill in the gaps where they're weaker elsewhere? So yeah, I think that's my hope for the strategy in particular. And then for individuals, I think there is a sense of trying to work out how you can locally build a better environment, how you can broaden your contributions at your institution, through conferences and the communities that we all work in, to make sure that you are supporting those around you, that you are contributing to that how as well as the what. I think that has been a challenge for people for a long time because the system often disincentivized you for spending time anywhere else other than just producing papers. So I hope that the system will begin to kind of catch up. And we're very excited at Wellcome to be launching our new schemes soon that will have much more detail about what we think good contributions look like. What would we be encouraging researchers to do? And I think that can take one of many, many different formats. You know, we're not kind of restricting people, but I think trying to support colleagues, contribute to things like open research agendas, public engagement. I think we know all the different things that are around us that are good contributions. It's just that they've never been rewarded properly in the past. So yeah, that's my hope for the future.
Thanks, Ben. That's a hopeful message. A bit following on from that, on the side of what researchers can do, there is a question from the audience about what tools are available to facilitate discussions among researchers at all levels. And I think you've already given some good things in the presentation, and we might be able to just share some links directly to that answer. But maybe you wanted to just add something there as well.
Yeah, just briefly to say that I think in some ways the impact of the pandemic has helped us rethink how we connect together as communities. And, you know, for example, it's a delight to come and join us today. It would have been much harder if I had to fly across the ocean. So I think trying to take away the positive things that we've been shown through the pandemic and finding ways to reduce the barriers for people getting involved. You know, with the conference that we're hosting next week, that was originally planned as a physical event in a conference centre in London. That would have excluded the vast majority of people who we've now got coming next week. Instead, we said, let's spread the content out over a whole week, make it so that there's no more than a couple of hours a day that you have to dip into around your work and things. It will all be pre-recorded, and try and just think about who we're accidentally excluding and who we connect to. So yeah, my encouragement would be to kind of go out there and look at some of these new platforms that have risen up and the new connections that you can build to try and broaden out networks and hear ideas.
Definitely. And in terms of starting the discussions, then is the coffee culture, is that something that somehow is still available, or are other tools from Wellcome?
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this stuff has been kind of thrown out as available for anyone to kind of use and kind of change and do whatever they wish. So the cafe culture kits are now available as a digital version on the website, and you can download it and kind of use it locally and swap in your own kind of examples and kind of priorities. So yeah, we'd very much encourage people who are interested to kind of take a look at that as a really nice way of giving structure to often difficult conversations.
Thank you. Then there's a specific question around harassment and bullying, and a double one, partly about whether that was covered in the survey. I guess, you know, we've touched on it very briefly, but I think there might be a bit more you want to say about that. But also whether there are already policies that we know of that are trying to reduce harassment in research environments that maybe others can also learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a whole series of bullying and harassment policies have come out among funders across the UK in the last couple of years, with very strong lines about it being completely unacceptable in the workplace. Wellcome itself likewise has a zero tolerance approach to bullying and harassment amongst those we fund, and we have retracted grants in the past when that's occurred. So we're very firm about that being an absolute red line for Wellcome. I think the challenges are that when you follow just that system alone, is that you retract a grant from a kind of grant holder, a PI. They have a team. The team were obviously often a victim or in that situation, but are suddenly now left without a person to lead the lab, and the kind of grant funding situation has changed around them. So we were very aware that it was important to have those sorts of red lines, but that you shouldn't want to ever use them if you can help it. So we want to go beyond that and say, how do we avoid that happening in the first place so that we don't end up with this disruption? And I think that's where we're thinking very carefully about rewarding people who invest in their teams, who do the exact opposite of bullying and harass, which is to nurture people's careers, to really invest in colleagues, to be a good colleague, and to capture some of that contribution. And that might mean that we have to have a closer relationship with the team members and hear about feedback from them to really understand from the PI how they've developed their team and what their plans are and how they'll put that into practice, and work with them to do that as well, to be supportive. So our hope is that not only can we be very clear that bullying and harassment has no place whatsoever in research, we can also be clear with people about what they should be doing, which is being really great at this and investing time in it. And when that energy and time is taken to do it properly, we will respect that and reward it appropriately. So yeah, my hope is that we can get away from ever needing a bullying harassment policy, ever having to put it into action, hopefully, by meaning that people have a much better experience of being managed well in research.
Yeah, no, definitely. You've in the previous answer also touched on, how with the pandemic, there was really a need to have these conversations differently. I'm also kind of curious about your views on how the pandemic maybe has, in some cases, supported or presented extra barriers to some of the challenges. I'm specifically thinking about things like, I think open science. There's been a lot of discussion on how, this has been a push for open science, and in other areas where I think for inclusion and diversity, maybe there are additional barriers. Now, do you have any thoughts on, the kind of influence of the pandemic, not just on how we have these conversations, but just on some of the topics that we have under this research culture umbrella?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, I think the pandemic has exposed some of the best features and the worst features of the research environment and the research culture as it is. As you say, I think one of the positive things has been the sense of people being much more comfortable about attribution. So, publishing data, all these things, people have recognized the priority of getting information out there and sharing it as quickly as possible, trusting that in the long run, they will be understood to have contributed to something really important and not worrying quite so much about the kind of tokens to show that along the way, which often then get in the way of open research. I think that's partly been driven by funders being very clear about the fact that we care enormously about COVID research. We've been funding it, we've been supporting people to do it, and obviously trying to get ideas into implementation as quickly as possible. So I hope that funders will come away from that as well, thinking, how do we keep that environment, that sense of trust, that attribution and kind of respect will be delivered for the work done, and that you don't have to worry quite so much as the researcher in collecting that paper trail, that publication list that proves that you were the kind of the first person on X, Y, and Z. So I do think in the long run, that's going to need a much closer relationship between the researcher and the funder. But I hope that in the future that we can kind of aspire to that. As you say, though, there's also been, enormous pressures created by the pandemic. We work very closely with a lot of clinical researchers who've spend time both in the kind of healthcare system and in research, who've obviously had a very, very difficult experience, particularly in the UK. We're very aware of trying to be conscious of the instability that the pandemic has caused for people, and we've gone out of our way to try and extend grants where possible to give people flexibility back so that they feel comfortable that they aren't going to have funding run out in the middle of a very difficult period for the whole country, the whole world. So yeah, I think there's lots to take away, and I do think that one of the big ones is about barriers to participation, and things like the move to online has created some problems, but it's also removed some of those barriers for people. And I think, again, just taking stock and taking away the best of that as things hopefully return to how they were, keeping some of those really good practices as a normal way of working. So yeah, I really hope we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think if we can learn from this and keep some of the things that have actually worked better, that would be already a good step forward. I see we're nearly coming to the end, but I wanted to just end on, you showed the overview of where people can submit ideas for how we can actually make progress on research culture. And so, I think you've come across a lot of ideas in the last few years. So I think my question would be, and I'm putting you a bit on the spot here, Ben, if you have to just point back to a few, maybe 2 or 3 ideas that you really have found creative, or maybe things that you really wouldn't have thought of yourself, what would be a few that you were inspired by and you'd want to kind of mention to other researchers?
Yeah, I think we had some, I mean, the nice thing about the kind of ideas on the Ideas Forum is they range from the very small to the very big, and I think that's exactly what we were hoping for. At the kind of smaller end, we've had some really helpful feedback on the kind of timings of grant deadlines. So don't put them just after Christmas, because that means people work all the way through Christmas to get it done. Being conscious of kind of people's lives around those deadlines. And that, the nice thing is that is something that we can implement, we can get on with straight away, and be conscious of in the future. And then kind of up towards the bigger end, people were talking about completely reforming peer review and all these sorts of things, which I think is really exciting. The other thing was kind of people talking about the rewards in the system. So who do we hold up as being the best researchers and the best contributors? And can we think about ways of, prizes and ways of drawing attention to people who've contributed in different ways, who've built careers in different ways, and show that you can be successful whilst doing this well, whilst valuing both the what and the how, as I've said. And I think I've been really inspired by some of the ideas about whether that's, you know, funding prizes or giving specific fellowships away, and also how we run our grant panels is who sits on those panels, what questions do they ask, really changes what people see as being valuable. So I think the one I've taken away is really carefully thinking about who you see represented as the kind of successful researchers, the kind of people that often get idolized in the system, and making sure that that group really represents the breadth of different people in research.
Yes, and I think that's a perfect note to end on, because I do think something that all these campaigns and all the people working on this have identified is that it's really the too narrow definitions of success, and maybe how we have defined things like excellence in the past, or maybe not defined. So it does sound like there's great ideas coming forward to solve those problems at the core and at different levels of that research culture umbrella. Thank you so much, Ben. That was a great talk and a great Q&A. And with that, I'll hand over back to Gledson.
Thank you, Karin. Thank you, Ben. It was Karin and Ben are indeed very humble. They are doing a really remarkable work on improving the awareness of research culture, but also on building structures of how to do it. And thank you very much for your participation, and thank you for Wellcome and MetisTalk for participating. Our next, we are going to start very soon a roundtable on open science, and but before I will just make some announcements. Our conference started on Monday. We had 2 sessions, outreach sessions of about Marie Curie Sklodowska funding schemes, and also the launch of the Chile chapter that was officially launched on Monday. The chair, Alejandro Tapia Pizarro, is the host of the Chile chapter, and he have a mission for the last 2 years. Welcome, Alejandro and the Chile chapter members. We have today, after our open science roundtable, we are going to have another roundtable. This one in geodiversity and UNESCO Global Geoparks will be in the afternoon. This roundtable is being organized by our member Rafael Ocelli Pinheiro, who works at in Milan. He's a Marie Curie Sklodowska fellow there. And tomorrow we have a workshop for Marie Sklodowska individual fellows. So it will be a training session, a very practical training session for the new fellows that were recently awarded the scholarships, but also to previous fellows. We are going to have testimonials from fellows around the world, but also at training on how going through the specifics of implementation of the requirements for the scholarships, for the individual fellowships, and also a training on career development plan. That will be very interesting session. It will be tomorrow morning in Brazil, Brazil time, and 2 o'clock and Central European time. Tuesday, we are going to have, on Friday, we have 2 interesting roundtables, one on improving visibility of women in STEM strategies and success stories, who's being organized by the Argentina chapter. And also the afternoon, how to improve networking and collaboration for Latin America research in COVID times. This is a very relevant roundtable, also organized by the Argentina chapter. And it will be a very interesting discussion about how here in Latin America can improve and can and advance our research despite the pandemic and the limitations that it makes on our mobility and collaboration. In a few minutes, in 5 minutes, we are going to start our roundtable on open science. So I'm going to Yes, we already have most of our panelists here. And this roundtable, I think it's very interesting. It's a good following the session on research culture, because how we do our science, how we publish, how we share our data, it's very it's very important, and it's central to research culture as well. How we do evaluate our scientists, how do the institutions, the funders, how we can evaluate the research. It's a thing that is being needs a great needs work on changing that, if you want to have a more like a wider, open, equitable science. And we are going to discuss this along other topics on open science on this roundtable. And we are going to start in 5 minutes. So we are going to have just a quick break and of 5 minutes, and I come back to open the room in 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, see you. Hello, thank you. Welcome to the second session of the day, a roundtable on open science. For those of you who have just arrived, we had a morning with the keynote speech from Ben Bleasdale about research culture, and also welcoming from the European ambassador to Brazil, Ambassador IBAñEZ, and a speech by the Professor Bourguignon, the president of ERC, and also the welcoming from our chair, the Marie Curie Alumni Chair, Mostafa Moonir. We would like to thank all of you who have joined us. We are streaming on YouTube and also on the Zoom webinar. This session, we have a key question and answers. You are welcome to send your questions. I would like to thank all our speakers for this session. It's a high-level session. We try to bring a good representation of Latin American and European stakeholders on open science. So thank you very much for the moderator, Matthias Bjornman from CISAR, and also to our speakers, Ariana Becerril Garcia, Abel Parker from Ariana from Redalic, Abel Parker from Cielo, FAPESP, Bianca Amaro from La Referencia, Sara Derrige from the Leading University, and Michael Arentoff from the European Commissions. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. It is an honor to have you all here for this discussion. So the roundtable is going to be chaired by Matthias, so I'm not going to extend too much. So I would like to welcome Matthias Bjornman to give us the welcoming words and to have an introduction to the roundtable. Many thanks. Please, Matthias, welcome.
Thank you, Gledson. Thank you very much. The pandemic is putting pressure on the scientific community to make science open and more collaborative. Researchers, universities, funders, publishers, and governments, we should all take this opportunity to make science truly open, equitable, and fair for all. Today, we will discuss which kind of open science we would like to see implemented and how we can make it work, considering the many global realities, interests, and constraints in place. Good morning, friends in Latin America and South America. Good afternoon, friends in Europe, and good day to all friends around the globe. My name is Matthias Bjornman, as Gledson said, and I will be your host for this roundtable on open science after the pandemic. Which, how, and for whom. I'll give a short introduction to myself and for the context here, and then I'll invite our panelists to give their opening statements. So yes, I'm Matthias. I'm a member of the Marie Curie Alumni Association as a previous fellow myself. Previously, I was the vice chair of the policy working group for the Marie Curie Alumni Association. And I'm currently working for CSAR, which you can see here in the background, which is the strong and united voice of universities of science and technology in Europe. We have 53 member universities all across Europe and beyond, representing over 1,000 academic staff and over 1 million students. We have been a strong supporter, and now actually I can talk both on behalf of my current association with CSAR, but also of the Marie Curie Alumni Association for open science over many years. Recent developments we've seen here includes, from a European perspective, of course, the Plan S and the rights retention strategy that was launched last year by the Coalition S, and we'll touch upon this in the discussion, I'm sure. And a big push for us as an association. So again, I can talk both with my current hat as advisor for research innovation with CSAR and in my previous role in the MCAA, is of course around supporting research culture and towards culture change, where our president of CSAR, Rick van der Walle, the rector of Ghent University, personally committed towards leading this change with the help of our association and pushing for this change. The key questions that we have defined today, and I introduced them briefly in the beginning, is how can we make open science more fair and equitable, given all the different forms and interests involved? And to what extent has the COVID-19 pandemic shifted the course for the implementation of open science? Some important topics here include the Sao Paulo Statement on Open Access, which was jointly signed in May 2019 by the Coalition S, the African Open Science Platform, America, OA 2020, and Cielo. And I'd like to explore with our panelists today if we see how this has been implemented and if there is more follow-up needed, and how we see that how it has played out, especially in the time of the pandemic. Then Plan S and the rights retention strategy, knowing full well that Coalition S and Plan S have been on a charm offensive, you can say, with the global arena as well, to engage with partners around the world, including in Latin America. A third topic is the reach of the Latin American open access initiatives, knowing full well from a European perspective myself that there is a lot of leadership happening in Latin America and a lot of lessons that the world can learn from the open access initiatives based there and led from there. And the relationship between research evaluation and open access. Our panelists today, which were briefly introduced here as well, we have Sara de Rieke from Leiden University, Michael Arentoft from the European Commission, Ariana Becquerel Garcia from Redalic in America, Abel Pecker from Cielo, and Bianca Amaro from La Reverencia and EBICT. From my side as well, thank you all very much for joining us for this roundtable. And I would like to start here by inviting each panelist to make a short opening statement, reflecting on their role in the open science landscape and setting the tone for our further discussion. As Gledson said, we want this and we encourage all participants to submit questions into the Q&A here in Zoom or through the channels that you have. As soon as you have them, you don't have to wait until the end of the opening statement. So just feel free to add them and we'll bring them up in our discussion. So without further ado, let me start here from the list that I had on screen. So Sara de Rieke from Leiden University, please, I invite you to take the floor and make your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Just checking. Great. I would like to delve into the wicked problem of responsible research assessment. I guess as Ben already pointed out in his keynote, the current assessment culture is strongly author and also excellence oriented. It attaches great value to problematic indicators, such as the journal impact factor. And this is problematic because such indicators partly determine scientists' career opportunities, acquisition of research grants. And if we want to really focus more on collaboration and do that through open science, this must also really be rewarded. So we really need a new system of recognition and reward. Now, I would like to talk to you briefly about two things that are currently happening on a global scale. And one is about the role of funders. So that also nicely links up, I think, to Ben's talk from the Wellcome Trust. And the other is about the role of research leaders in the transition to open science. So I'll start with the role of funders, and I'd like to share with you some results from a global survey we did of responsible research assessment policies and practices in the participant organizations of the Global Research Council. And most of these organizations that participate in the Global Research Council are national public funding agencies. So we sent out this survey to 120 of these organizations. It was open last year from the beginning of September to the start of October. And in the end, it was completed by 55 of those organizations. And that is a really good overall response rate of around 46%. And they came from all across the world. So before I share some results, I'd like to take a step back because ultimately, I think the purpose of open research is to improve research in both cultures and in practices and also in products. So a key aim here should be to influence researcher behavior even if this takes us into really complex and also contentious territory. And funders are really in a unique position to push us forward because they have more freedom and also more agency to experiment and also to drive change than others in the research system. So if we look at the survey, that's interesting to keep in the back of our heads, because specifically where we asked about open science practices, we saw that 76% of the respondents assess non-publication outputs such as software and codes and algorithms and also data sets. And 4 organizations reported that they will consider including non-publication outputs also in the future. And I thought there was more good news for open science, because not only do most respondents really encourage and also promote open access and open science, but around 41 to 46% indicated that they are considering including open access publications and also data curations and open research data in their future evaluation practices. So I think we can be really upbeat about these developments, and also that there's a progressive and very lively engagement with open science here, which is already impacting basically some funder practices. And the second thing I wanted to briefly talk with you about comes from my membership of an expert group of UNESCO. And that group is tasked with developing a global recommendation on open science. And these recommendations, perhaps you know that, are legal instruments in a sense. So they're intended to really influence also the development of national laws and practice. And this instrument on open science, I think, is really consequential, because also it takes this topic of open science to this global level. And one of the recommendations to member states is to actively engage in removing the barriers for open science, particularly when they relate also to research and career evaluation systems. So we really need to break these barriers in the way we assess researchers. And when it comes to early career researchers, I guess the recommendations are also interesting, because we say there that we should really maximize engagement and participation of all people and cultures and languages and stakeholders and disciplines in the process. Democratization also means that we really need to engage early career researchers, enable them to contribute to open science, instead of pressurizing them into thinking with indicators, so to say. So they should be really at the center of open science activities, because we need their inputs. We need them to be rewarded for making articles and chapters open access. And we need them to be rewarded for spending time on peer reviewing preprints, for instance, working collaboratively on text and data mining, etc. And this is where the research leaders, I think, come in. That's my last point. They really should develop a supportive structure and reward system for open science practices. We need to put academic leadership central stage here, because of course a real challenge here is this move away from bad metrics and rankings toward more responsible forms of research assessment. Senior leaders in universities are really pivotal to this shift, and they need to place more emphasis on increasing openness, including the sharing of early results and other types of output. So they must drive forward cultural changes to enable early career researchers to contribute as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for an excellent start and with the opening statements. Michael Arentoft from the European Commission, you have the floor, please.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me here. Let me first very briefly for the whole audience clarify the roles that we have, the many roles that we have in the European Commission in the open science landscape. First of all, we're policymakers. So for instance, we issue recommendations to our member states on various aspects of open science. Secondly, we are regulators. So for instance, we have directives such as the one which is only 1 or 2 years ago on copyright. And thirdly, very important also, we are funders. So we use our own programs, which are very big, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, where we have obligations. We set obligations for open access and for fair data management to be fulfilled by our grantees. So we have these multiple roles to influence the open science landscape. You have addressed two key questions to us. I would like to start with the second one, because I think that's what we have lived during the past year, the open science lessons learned and the challenges from COVID-19. I think we can safely claim that open science has really been at the center of the response to the pandemic. It has enabled access to and reuse of knowledge, of data, tools, infrastructure that we have seen demonstrated. It has indeed accelerated the response and also increased the quality of the response to the pandemic. We have seen that the pandemic has made science more open, more collaborative internationally, also more digital even, although it was already to a great extent that. So just for instance, during the last year, we have seen that open access publications have superseded subscription-based publications globally, and this is the first time that this has happened. Also, the vast majority, of course, of papers on COVID are open access. And very important to remark also over the last year is that we have seen a massive increase in preprints during 2020. I mean, here I'm talking of factors of 7, 8, 9 times as much as we've seen in other years. So we have a natural intensification of international collaborations, of international initiatives. We have seen open science as a precondition. It's a precondition. It's sharing what is needed to advance in the most effective way. However, and there is a but here, these openings that we have seen have been to some extent conditional. So although we have seen that the way to do research has been transformed by the pandemic, it has not been sufficiently radical. So open access is still only very partial. Open access is not full, it's not immediate, and it's not permanent. The openings have a certain duration. Most open access papers, and even the COVID ones, do not make their underlying data available without any restrictions. And those who do, they don't have clear licenses for reuse. Also, the research data in general are not fully interoperable. They are not fully reusable, and they have certainly not, in many cases we've seen, been shared fast enough. What we have seen from our side also, because we have launched a major initiative right after the pandemic started in the context of the European COVID data platform, we have seen major obstacles in combining heterogeneous data. So genomic data with clinical or patient data, major obstacles in doing that. And finally, we have seen that although we have made quite important investments in infrastructure, and this has helped us to establish this very quickly, we don't yet have an open science infrastructure that is sustainable, that is interoperable, and which you could say, we are not yet prepared for any future crisis that might come. And this is our opportunity to get there. So important to say also that this struggle we have had to bring together data from different sources is not only a technical problem, it is very much also a legal problem, a structural problem that depends on national or even institutional policies and rules. So to sum up my answer to the second question, key question that you posed, Matthias, yes, the pandemic has shifted the course of open science, but it has not been sufficiently radical to persist in all these aspects, at least in the short term. But in the longer run, of course, we hope that the pandemic has showed how important it is that open science behavior, open science culture of sharing and open collaborative work by researchers, but also by institutions, will be positively assessed and rewarded by funders and policymakers, seeing that as part of excellent research and as part of being an excellent researcher. So here I'm a bit referring to what Sarah already had as a main point. Let me also very quickly then address the first question, which is about fair and equitable open access. So here it's clear that there are many balances that we need to strike between different interests, but also between different models of open science. So we have an EU Latin American strategic roadmap and an action plan for science, technology and innovation cooperation. And here we very clearly recognize that many Latin American states have a very strong tradition. And you said, I think in the beginning, leadership of open access publishing. So a tradition of academia-led, non-for-profit open journals using the CC license without retention of copyright, very importantly. And in this roadmap, we have also acknowledged that Latin American states have a wide variety of initiatives on research data management, being it from open data policies to implementation of institutional repositories in universities or other research organizations. We have also remarked, though, in this roadmap that open access repositories, institutional publishing initiatives, also play a key role in our open access policy at the EU level, although we come from a different situation. So this has meant, for instance, currently in our programs, we do financially support full open access publishing venues that charge publication fees, but we're also supporting publishing models that do not have a commercial interest. So we're not fixed on one or the other model, but we have to recognize we come from a certain history, and we have to care for different models and in our system. So looking forward, we have said in several fora that linking data commons around the world represents a common interest between Europe and Latin America. And this is, you could describe this as an ideal situation for us to have some kind of global commons of science or global commons of research or knowledge resources with some commonly agreed principles for how we govern such a commons in a transparent way. And of course, underpinned by infrastructures that are sustainable and interoperable and that really support data-driven science and open science. So this is our vision for international cooperation on open science, to have such a web of digital objects, and indeed it would go beyond publications and include other digital objects, data, software, models, workflows, and have certain principles like open by default, or at least for data, being as open as possible, as closed as necessary. And very importantly also the licensing aspects, which are key to enable researchers to build on the work of others. Something which is either not always clearly understood, or at least not something that researchers or research systems get down to implementing. So in short, my answer to the first key question would be, yes, we have to make open science more fair, more equitable. And in that process, we must account for the different interests and the models for open science. But it doesn't mean that we cannot work together to arrive at this ideal of a global commons of science resources. Thanks. Back to you, Matthias.
Thank you very much, Michael. So this, and I really like the, yes, it has shifted, but not sufficiently radically. That's an interesting starting point. Thank you very much. After this, we have Ariana Becquerel Garcia, please.
Thank you, Matthias. Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to chair this roundtable with all of you. And congratulations, Gledson and the organizers, on making it possible. Well, I would like to remind us that Latin America has kept, as Matthias and also Michael said, a strong tradition in open science. as a natural way to disseminate knowledge, where neither author fees nor subscriptions have been involved. Academic institutions in this region are in charge of publishing journals in such a way that each institution's investment mutually benefits all other institutions and society in general. An ecosystem, yes, with the strengths, but also with vulnerabilities and with challenges, especially in the systemic coexistence with other open science models. However, the international research assessment, as Sarah pointed out before, based on rankings and journal-based metrics from the so-called mainstream databases, have led scientific output from Latin America and from other developing regions to be considered as peripheral or with marginal visibility and recognition. On the other hand, the current response from commercial publishers to open access is a transference of subscription costs to author fees, the APCs, a strategy materialized in transformative agreements, for example. This unfortunate circumstance causes at least three negative effects. First, the exclusion of researchers to participate in publishing due to lack of resources. Second, the deviation of the money away from the academic sector. And last but not least, the risk of rupture of the non-commercial and cooperative ecosystems. Well, REDALIC, one of the organizations that I'm representing today, has been driven since its creation 18 years ago by a strong and natural commitment of supporting the science as commons approach. However, it was until 2016 that, joined with various allied stakeholders through the America Initiative, we made principles and core values more strict due to a context of distortion and the undermining of the non-commercial ecosystem of scholarly communications in the region. So we believe that values and principles should be operationalized in infrastructures and platforms. Inclusion and equity, for example, are key values in our approach. Those we implemented, a non-APC, for example, as a compulsory requirement for the journals which want to be part of REDALIC. A decision to offer our services exclusively to Diamond Open Access Journal. So the aim of this model is to develop technology and offer editorial workflow services for journal production and quality control in order to contribute directly in the sustainability of non-commercial journals and to help them to achieve organic visibility, discoverability, and impact as a product of an innovative and complex information processing, taking scientific content to a higher level of structuring that enables them to be automatically processed and linked to a wider and unrestricted knowledge cloud of commons, as Michael pointed out before, beyond commercial solutions. So crises like the one we are facing with the COVID-19 pandemic show the importance of the immediacy in communicating research findings, as well as to allow an efficient and effective global scientific conversation. The need of data sharing, interoperability, data processability, and other functionalities like this to allow fast cross-data analysis, for example, to perform, research on vaccine side effects, among many other useful research areas, are essential topics in the discussion of open science. Paradoxically, last year, Nature announced that an author must pay around $11,000 in order to publish in these journals, on this family of journals in open access. Please think that this is half year's salary of a well-positioned researcher in a Latin American country. We strongly believe this fact marks the point of no return in the inflation of author fees worldwide. And this is not the way to achieve sustainable or equitable scholarly communications at all. More than 10,000 articles are published in journals or have been published in journals indexed by REDALIC on topics related to epidemics and COVID-19, open and published with no APCs. Now, initiatives are emerging that seek to achieve open access at global levels, such as Plan S. Some of the questions that arise when trying to build a more neutral, equitable, and inclusive space for scholarly communication should include: is there a possibility for the non-commercial ecosystem to survive when the big funding flows are being directed to the commercial sector? We believe technologies are capable of contributing to achieve a healthier system and to level the playing field in the benefit of the non-commercial sector. So, well, finally, what is, I would like to question us, what is the future we envision for the dissemination of science? In whose hands should it be to allow indiscriminate participation? We are facing a great opportunity to reshape our global system in favor of the development of science and to make our society more resilient for the future challenges. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariana. Now I'd like to invite Abel Packer, please, from Cielo.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to participate in this panel with such nice people. I will try to follow from what the previous speakers told, which I agree with the, let's say, evaluation of the status of open science and the fact that we are discussing here. I think evidences that we hope and we think it will be the way that in the near future or some more years, open science will permeate the research, the scientific universe. The characteristic of open science to advance is the need of convergence or alignment of all actors and the instances of the research endeavor. It's not only a responsibility of researchers, it's not the only responsibility of the journals. So the challenge is how to orchestrate, common lines that will converge us towards, predominance of the, let's say, practices or expressions of open science. Okay, I will talk about the experience of Cielo, and we do identify that the open science, let's say, is acquiring momentum throughout the universe or ecosystem of scholarly communication. So we can say expressions of interest and the solutions being proposed and so on. We start formally, the implementation of open science practices since 2018, when we had a meeting of the Cielo network, and we did approve the priority lines of action for 2019 to 23. These lines of action proposes that by 2023, most, if not all, journals will be aligned with open science practice. It's tremendous challenge, tremendous challenge, as we could see for the previous presentation and the discussions that we have been taking in the community. So we have in the Cielo network now a structure which involves 17 national collections of journals, open access, gold way, CC BY license, and we have also thematic collection on public health, which is very important for most of the countries. So there was an initiative from World Health Organization, through Pan American Health Organization, to promote this collection, which put together journals on public health from the different countries. And of course, they are very important today in the publication of research on COVID-19. And the last year, from April, we implemented the Cielo preprints, which is running relatively very well. No, it's not perfect. We are using the PKP OPS platform, but the experience is very positive in terms of learning how preprints play the role of the beginning of the information flow. The second, let's say, key is that the preprints offer to authors, offer to researchers the opportunity for them to have fully control on the publishing of their research. Okay, that is a contribution that the Cielo preprint and the other, of course, bring it to the infrastructure of research communication. The second implementation that we did is Cielo Data, okay, which uses the Harvard Dataverse technology, which permits that recursively we can create a data repository for each journal. So the idea is that progressively we have this concatenation, this convergence of the data, computer program, schemas, and so on, object with the manuscript and the article version of the record running, let's say, together, and which, as I said before, is a challenge of how to orchestrate preprint data, final version, and so on. It's not easy. It's very, very complex, no, in terms of change, disruptions, and etc. The third improvement or that we are doing is the opening of the peer review process, which is a big challenge because the reaction to the opening of evaluation of the manuscript, let's say, is generalized. No, there is not yet enough critical mass for us to say that the learning or the S curve already started towards open peer review. So what we are doing is offering options of opening and starting, for example, with the publishing in any article of the editor which was responsible for the process. Okay, this gives authority to the journal on the, let's say, transparency of the process. We have a more clear responsibility. The other one is that we did create the type of document, which is the peer review report. Nobody write anyone until now, because most of the journals says that they do not have yet enough reports that could be qualified as a final document to receive a DOI and publish. But we do expect that this will start to happen in the future. We also offer, when the researchers submit an article, they are asked if they wanted to open their identity if the manuscript was not already published, deposited in a preprint. Okay, and also offer to the reviewers if they wanted to contact direct. So let's say the possibility to start to open the process is there. No, And now what we, let's say, miss is, of course, the culture, no? And the decisions that this will be fully used. We also are improving interoperability, which is critical for the visibility of the journals and the researchers, no? And I would say that the critical characteristic and success of Cielo in the last 23 years has been the interoperability. No, 85% of the access that comes to Cielo comes from different places and not from the let's say the Cielo interface. So we could simply do not have an interface in Cielo, and still we will have let's say almost 1 million average downloads per day using the counter technology. So interoperability is critical. So challenges that we have facing and we are working with it is that the classical structure of research communication is deeply established, you know, and is deeply there. It's not easy to introduce a change. It affects, as has been said already, research evaluation, career of academic career, particularly the issue of the new people that could lead the development of open peer review practices. They are, let's say, sequestered. No, they are hijacked for a system that say the way to go is this one. The journals you need to publish is this one. What you need in your department is this indicator and so on. So that is what really driving the way you plan, you project your research, and not what we have been saying, the concepts of open science. But anyway, these are, of course, interacting. Journals, and this is we have this daily experience. Journals perceive, you know, preprints, open data, open science in general, as a risky to their positioning. No, they had, let's say, a classical kind of autocratic position in the flow of information. I received the manuscript, you really don't know what is happening, and 6 months and 1 year after, I tell you what was our decision. This is an incredible power. No? So they think that by opening or have the manuscript already available and so on, may put in risk, okay, their history or their course. So this is a critical point that we do need to show the advantages of the open science that will, let's say, increase really the visibility of research, the visibility of a journal, the visibility of articles. No? Authors, as I said before, authors in open science, they are given the opportunity to have an incredible control over the publication of their researchers, okay? But in many cases, preprint, for example, they, let's say, see the risk that putting a manuscript in a preprint will lessen the, let's say, probability to be approved by a journal. No, that is real. No, and senior researchers are very committed to the classical way of publishing, so they orient their researchers to publish the old way. No? And research agencies are not proactively in favor of open science. Let's say, for example, radically, if a national research says all research funded by public money should start the publishing via preprint, that would change everything. Okay, but they do not say that. They say all research or most of research should be published in this ranking of the journals. Okay, it's completely different, this policy. And so ultimately, we think that we will take a same time to be open science, be fully and completely accepted, So rapidly, lessons learned, innovations in scholarly communication happen slowly. Unfortunately, Cielo has in its DNA innovation, but we face such resistance, barriers, difficulties, every place, which contributes for us to improve Cielo policies, Cielo methodology, and so on, to, let's say, overcome this perception or these difficulties. Preprints, however, preprints, research data, and so on, they are empowered by the web property of virtualization and disintermediation. Okay, we can discuss, it's not the moment, of course, and everybody knows that, but that is an intrinsic, let's say, force from the medium is the message, okay, that will contribute to advance of preprint research data and the opening. Of course, academic careers is critical. If we do not say, or we do not have the open science as a factor to advance a career, the barriers will remain for a long time. And of course, there is also, and particularly in what we are living, the COVID-19, the sense of urgency in communicating science, okay? That is critical today, and that is the reason why preprints, okay, and the opening of the data is acquiring momentum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Bianca Amaro, please.
Thank you, Matthias, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I think that's a very good space to change how we feel, how we think about the things. It's very difficult to talk after Abel and Ariana, because they give all the picture of Latin American and the most important initiatives as Cielo and Redalic. I'm here in the condition of a president of the La Referencia network. La Referencia is a network of Latin American network of open access repositories. We are made up 10 countries nowadays, and the most countries of Latin America. And it's interesting to say that Spain now makes part of La Referencia. And to me, it's very interesting because it's a kind of a world of a Spanish world. And the language here is very important. And so it's okay. We are focused in Latin America, and we will continue doing that. And nowadays we have an aggregator of the national aggregators, and we have in La Referencia almost 3 million of documents in our network, and it's very interesting. Our main responsibility is to give visibility of our scientific production. We have to demonstrate to the world that Latin American produce an excellent science, because in general, the North countries don't know the production of Latin American. And I have to say that our metadata is collected, harvested to the open air initiative. And so it's a kind of a movement to do our science more visibility, more visibility. But I'd like to express, another thing. We are working together to giving strategies to the countries how to manage the world of data repositories, to create their infrastructures, and the strategy to convince, because we have to convince all the governments, because we are a network that the representative is made of the governments. It's not initiatives, it's not universities, but the governments of each country are represented there. And I would like to say something about one of the points that were signed as an issue to say. It's about São Paulo's statement on open access. I think that the declarations and the statements are very, very important. But I think that we have problems with the implementation of the declarations in general. The declarations are fantastic in terms of philosophical way to think. But we have a strong actions related with implementation. These things, I think, that occurs all around the world with all the declarations. The declarations are very important, but I think that they don't achieve all the people that we need to achieve to change the things. And so I think that I agree with all the declarations. They are fantastic to try to change the world, but they are not so that effective as they could be. Okay. Another point is the relationship between research evaluation and open access. The things will changing the way researchers are assessed essentially. In our countries, in Latin America, it's very important. Our culture is to better evaluate researchers who publish more in closed journals and use metrics that do not correspond to our reality. We should better evaluate researchers who adopt open science practice, but we don't do it. And so I think that it could be very important to Latin American and the global South if the North-South could change in the solid way the rules of the game. We depend of the rules of the game. We cannot do much if the North doesn't change. It's essential for me. We need to do this kind of evaluation, another kind of evaluation, but we need that the North change their evaluation to show to our government that the rules are changed. are really changed. Because if we think about to convince our governments to do, cause the thing is philosophical correctly, we do not change anything. And another point is very important here. I think that we have to convince the researchers. And so because of it, I think that's so important to speak to the early researchers, because they have to do much. They have to change this kind of thing. It's very difficult to change the mind of an old researcher, but it's much more easy to work with the early researchers. I think that our initiatives are going so well in Brazil. In Latin America, and we are starting to organize our infrastructure to be a presence in the open science in the strong way. I think that, for example, another thing, Plan S. I think that if any initiative want to be international initiative, they have to see how all the world moves, and not only the European reality. Because Plan S, it's okay, it's a very good initiative, but it's not an initiative that are fitted to us. Because we have the reality that we are the open access region, and so some kind of things doesn't work in thinking about Plan S. And relationships, São Paulo, I think that it is all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for their opening statements. We have now just over half an hour for discussion and the roundtable part. I see we already have a question, and I invite everybody who is listening in to please submit questions or topics for discussion. So if I just kick off by some of the broader themes I heard here, touched upon infrastructure, tools, and systems. We had discussion around research culture, which also has to do with the history of research and where research coming from and where it's going. Research assessment systems closely linked to this, but also some legal conditions that enable the type of changes that have happened or that we would like to see. To kick this off, I have a question here from Brian Cahill, who says 97% of all journals published in Brazil are open access. What can Europe learn from Brazil? Which many of you have touched upon already, but I'd like to invite our European colleagues to maybe reflect on this first, and then we can open the floor. Just for housekeeping, feel free to raise hand physically or use the raise hand button, or anyway indicate when you would like the floor. So first, perhaps Sarah, would you like to reflect on this?
Thank you. Yes, I was thinking while Bianca was speaking about this, I don't know if the expression is correct. English is not my first language either. So this double bind that indeed Brian is also pointing to, that Europe, I represent Europe now, can learn from open access cultures in South America as well. And the other way around, that we have a responsibility to also demonstrate that change can actually work and happen, that Bianca, I think, pointed to as well. So there's this interesting way in which we can hopefully bring this about together. It's quite difficult. If I may, if I'm speaking, I would also like to reiterate a point that she made, actually, that I very much agree with, that we shouldn't leave it to declarations or statements of principles. And I was talking about this global recommendation, which is in effect doing something like that on a scale that maybe is a bit unprecedented, but it's also really important that we don't leave it at that. So I was one of the authors of the Leiden Manifesto, and that really taught me that lesson that Bianca just made clear. So they are really important signposts, very important things for people to point to. But there's also this risk that they become substitutes for action. We really need to make sure that institutional commitments by, for instance, signing DORA or committing to the Leiden principles or other principles around open access and open science, that they are really followed by the hard work of reforming cultures and also practices and processes. And indeed, as you just did in your summary, a couple of the elements that come into play are around infrastructure and about technical and other forms of interoperability, but it's also really about culture change. And I think that is probably one of the other hard nuts to crack, that culture change element. And if I may, I end with a very soft lesson, I guess, for myself as a source of inspiration. I really recommend Kathleen Fitzpatrick's fantastic book on how universities can become more generous, because underlying all these issues are indeed infrastructural issues and technical issues and issues with performance culture. And she really charges us also to think about not about competition, but about being constructive, building new ideas and listening instead of speaking all the time, which I'm doing now. So I guess this building on other ways of being in academia is also, it's a really soft point, but it might also be one of the crucial elements that we tend to forget when we speak about open science. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Michael in a moment. I just like the reflection you did as well, and connecting to what Bianca said on well, double bind, we can say. It's a part of the aspect that Bianca discussed was that when it comes to evaluation, I wrote down here, North has changed evaluation first, and we haven't talked about rankers yet much, so that could also be a way there. So first, Michael, if you would like to add something to Sarah, and then I'll go to Bianca. Michael, please.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yes, actually this morning we had a consultation with the research funders in Europe and the national policymakers to see how we could move forward together on changing, not to say reforming, the research assessment system. The issue is that there is no first mover advantage, rather the opposite. There is a disadvantage if you're the only one. So you need a certain critical mass to move together towards reforming the research assessment system. And here I mean for research, for projects, for individual researchers, but also for their teams and for the institutions as well. So it is a whole systems approach, and there is a certain critical mass needed for everybody to move together in the same direction. So rewarding open collaboration, rewarding sharing, and also rewarding other aspects of the intrinsic quality and impact of the research. So I also agree very much with what Bianca said about the effectiveness or not of a declaration. So we have to be careful also that whatever form of agreement we will get first at European level among European funders, but also indeed worldwide, that this is followed up with concrete commitments and also a monitoring system to make sure that this is implemented. This is extremely important because we can do a lot at European level, but at the end of the day, it's at institutional level or regional or national level where the real changes will have to take place. And secondly, what we can do at European level is that we can show the way in our programs. And this, if you look at the Sao Paulo statement on open access, it talks about universal, full and immediate open access. It talks about free access to knowledge generated by public funds. I agree with Bianca, it's easy to subscribe to that, but you need to show the way. And when you have the power as a funder that we have in the European Commission, we need to show the way. And I think we've done it. In a month's time, we will publish the first calls for proposals on the Horizon Europe. And you will see that we have managed to make open science part of excellence. And this comes back to the other point of how you define excellence. If you say that, of course, the outcome, the excellence of the outcome is important, but equally important is the methodology that you have used to get there. And open science is an approach, is a methodology. And the quality of that approach is part of excellence. So by putting that into the excellence criteria of our major funding program, we are showing the way, I believe. And also, when we look at the capacities of the proposers, we will not look at the journal impact factor. We will ask for a qualitative assessment of past achievements, for instance, in publications. So just by these two features of our program that will apply across all proposals, all tens of thousands, if not say hundreds of thousands of proposals we receive over the next 7 years, we, I think, set the example of implementing, if you like, the spirit of a statement like the Sao Paulo Statement on Open Access. Also, because the question from the audience was, how can we learn from each other? And also here, I think in Horizon Europe, we're setting the example. So we will direct funds to support only publishing venues where all the content is openly accessible to all. So, for instance, we will no longer pay for publication fees in hybrid journals, even if they're covered by transformative agreements, since only part of their content is in open access. So here again, we are not dictating where our grantees should publish, but if they do not publish in full open access venues, we don't refund them. So here again, I think we are setting an example, again, inspired by the leadership of Latin American countries.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'll hand to Bianca for a short, if you wanted to add anything to this, especially I think it's in relation to, I took a quote here or a short note on Nord change evaluation first. Perhaps that's an interesting addition, and then we can go back to Sarah. I see she raising hand. Bianca, would you like the floor?
No, it's good to know the change in Europe. I think that we need that. We need concrete movements. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Sarah, please.
Yeah, maybe it's helpful to mention that I'm not sure how familiar you are with dynamics in the Netherlands. It's, of course, a relatively small country, but yeah, in addition to the comments that Michael just made on the European level, there's an interesting movement at the moment at the national level in the Netherlands, in which both the two large national funders and the Association of the Universities and the Association of the Medical Centers, where the majority of the life sciences and biomedical research takes place, joined up. They published a position paper last year. The title is Room for Everyone's Talent. And the fact that that is this leading knowledge coalition publishing this statement, it's a position paper that commits those organizations, so both the universities and the funders and the academic medical centers, to make changes within their organizations around team science, but also around open science and new forms of assessment, moving away from problematic metrics to more context-sensitive evaluations. It's a very interesting process to also be part of, from the perspective of leading one of the steering groups at the University of Leiden. The discussions are also informative because the responses are interesting for their the ways in which certain insecurities and uncertainties become more visible. For instance, around more narrative approaches that I think Michael also alluded to. So how can you do that in a way that is solid and rigorous? So these debates are ongoing, and I think that is one other example in which we on a national level are trying to practice what we preach, and also to test and really experiment and move beyond recommendations, and also to really collectively affect change. So with funders, but also institutions. So I think we need both of these actors, and they shouldn't keep pointing at each other, but really collectively work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And then go to Ariana and then back to Bianca. Ariana, please.
Thank you, Matthias. I just want to add something to, in terms of lessons learned from each region. I think it is very important to dismantle the construction of what we consider mainstream science and what we consider science of quality, because I have this impression that the Latin American open access tradition is very well recognized worldwide, but not the quality of the science. The journals published in the region are not recognized as sources of quality, or it's very hard for the journals to have this prestige. We have to remember that there is this myth that Scopus and Web of Science are the mainstream databases. And I have this impression that in many parts of the world, there are these only two sources of information that are considered to see not only the quality, but the existence of science. So we have been talking from different initiatives here in Latin America that are not considered of prestige in other regions. And so researchers are not encouraged to publish in Latin American journals the same way they are encouraged to publish in journals from commercial corporations. And this is, I think this is a very practical thing that we can start doing globally to recognize which sources of information have science of quality, in order to encourage these new models of open science to really be competitive and to really be part of this industry of prestige that is really putting at risk the Latin American journals and the non-commercial journals in general. So I think we have to be very careful, especially when talking or in the funders side, to think what is science of quality and really go beyond recognize that Latin America is doing something good, but we don't see the Latin American journals as quality venues to publish. So this like double discourse that sometimes I think is happening, I think we have to go beyond that to go this recognition and to implement some actions globally. And I think this is a very practical thing that we can start doing in both regions, of course.
Thank you very much, Ariana. Bianca, please.
Well, I was thinking about how could be interesting interchange models and structures. I really think that a really good, important movement could be if the universities and research information assume their scientific communications, like we do in Latin America, and not leave it in the hands of commercial publishers. I think that communication journals in the universities and scientific institutes could be a model interesting to adopt it to do the commercial editors to get more and more weak, because every time we are doing that kind of industry more and more strong. I think that it's a role of an institution to be in charge of their communication. And so I think that it could be spread in the North countries as a model that you use here. And in the region, I agree, I completely agree with Ariana. We need in the region more investment of our governments to do our journals better. We don't have a very good infrastructure to manage the journals and to do a journal, a qualified journal or a prestigious journal like the North has. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ariana, I see your hand is raised. What did you want to add, or was that was from previous? Okay, thank you. So thank you for those interventions. Let me bring in a second question here from the audience, which is Erica Mendez. How accelerate culture change in local countries independently of the vision of other countries? What about starting to pioneer changes in local academic systems independent of global recommendations? I think this might have been spurred by Sarah sharing her experiences of the Leiden Manifesto on one hand and the global UNESCO one. Sarah, would you like to react on that question?
Yeah, I guess what I'm learning from this discussion, I mean, I know that I know my own context best, and here I think in 2012 in the Netherlands we started this local discussion, and there were one or two institutions that started to experiment with new forms of recognition and reward, and the discussion was always about this friction between first mover versus more global effects, and a global science system would work against starting locally to affect change. And now 9 years later, the situation looks relatively differently. So we have a national level culture change ongoing. We have, as Michael pointed out, also this European level movement. Europe is, I think, the first mover, maybe in some respects, although we are also behind in others. We learn in this discussion quite clearly. I don't have a clear answer to this question, though it's a familiar friction, and I think it depends on the context what you can do. But in the Netherlands, I do think by starting from one institution, a very powerful, successful one, with the authority to say, we're not doing this because we want to do better in the current system. We are doing very good in the current system, but we think it's problematic because we have system failure, and we have stress, and we have fraud, and we have all these issues. So that's why we want it. And I think that might also have played a role in it being taken seriously, although that took years and years as well. I hope this helps a little bit in answering this question.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. And I think it's also brings in a bit the perspective from early career researchers. So many Marie Curie Alumni Association fellows are early stage researchers, not all, but many of them. So of course, one question is for early career researchers, how can we empower them, and how can we guide this community to help accelerate this change? I see Michael wanted to react perhaps on the previous topic. Michael, please. Then we go to Abel.
Yes, it was a bit on the previous issue. Indeed, Sarah mentioned the example on research assessment, where indeed there were institutions, in particular in the Netherlands and in Belgium as well, that showed the way. The Netherlands had now pulled this together at national level, very, I mean, in a very good way. And we are now being inspired from that at European level. So we take it up always to see to which extent we can scale up good practices nationally and institutionally at the higher level. Let me mention another example, which is that we will be launching next week a publishing platform that we will run in the European Commission. So it isn't our own publishing platform, so an institutional publishing platform, which starts with as an additional option for our beneficiaries to follow completely our open access requirements in the program. Our idea is that, because researchers, of course, they don't get funding only from us, they also get national funds or even private funds, that we, over the next years, would explore how this could be extended to other funders. So to extend it also to national funders to see who would like to use that repository as well. So we don't know yet how this will how this will pan out in terms of uptake and so on. But it's just to mention this, we call it Open Research Europe publishing platform, which will launch on the 24th of March. It's a non-APC platform, but you have seen others. So I could mention there is, for instance, the Irish Health Research Board, Open Research Board, which has seen an enormous uptake. And of course, there's the Wellcome Open Research Platform, where uptake has been enormous over the last year in particular.
Thank you, Michael. And I think that opens an interesting question around how we support these type of platforms, since we have the expertise, the very high level expertise in this room of running these type of platforms, journals and structures, repositories. So how can funders help ensure their long-term sustainability, financial and resource-wise? And this was one reaction from the Commission to help launch a service like this, or help provide a service like this. But first, Abel, you raised your hand, please.
Thank you. I would like to do two comments. One regarding the São Paulo Declaration, which I think declaration, is very important. Historically, they are not supposed to tell us how to do things. Okay? They tell us in a given moment of the history how a group of institutions, countries, people agreed regarding an issue. São Paulo Declaration has is very short and very important. They say scientific knowledge is a global public good. Okay, this makes a big difference. Okay, if in your practice you agree or apply or not is another problem, but that is an incredible statement, okay, that we take as a principle in Cielo from the very beginning. The second one, it says that to reach the common goal, it can be achieved through a variety of approaches, okay, and that is very democratic, that is very flexible in the sense that if we all agree here over a given point, okay, it's okay, but the level of agreement is statement, and then it says to seek active dialogue, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we have many years ago issued a declaration in a Congress that we called Salvador Declaration on Open Access, which was very much signaled the interest of a developing country. We see the worldwide open access movement. Nobody really uses that declaration, but it was very important for us and for many people. The other point regarding to this is the issue of, let's say, global south, global north, local, like the question, no, pioneer local solution. We think that the major challenge that science has today, that research have today, that scientific communication has today, is the lack of an inclusive global flow of scientific information. Portuguese, is a worldwide language. Spanish is a worldwide language. Objective of research from São Paulo, from Saltinho, from Chiapas, from whatever, they are global science. Okay, so the division that the publisher started many years ago, saying that you have mainstream journals, mainstream science, and the regional journals and the regional research, that was bought by our research system. So the issue that Adriana raised regarding recognition of the relevance of the Latin American, of the journals that are published in Latin America, is mainly an issue of Latin America, is an issue of the research councils, the issue of the communities that see or that bought this division. So the proposal that about the global south, global north in research, also I understand what is behind it, is a big error for us, because what we need is to be part of the global flow of scientific information, doing the research that is priority for us. Okay, but if you say you do the research priority for us and that is local, that does not solve the problem. We need to put our research in the global flow of scientific information. What the people has been said, the term was originally raised in Chile, and depois Open Edition publicized that. This is got the bibliodiversity, okay? So the diversity regarding research objective, regarding language, regarding culture, regarding relevance, that is what we need to enrich the global flow of scientific information. So that is our major challenge, our major fight, and of course we do need that the, let's say, minds of the rich country also could understand this, let's say, need to be more and more a global world. We are fully connected, okay? So we do not should, let's say, defend the division or the split of research, the split of research communication.
Thank you very much, Abel. Ariana, please.
Thank you, Matthias. I just want to, well, regarding that Michael said about the publishing platform that you're about to launch, I think these are wonderful news. We need more initiatives like this all around the world. But I just remind me that the issue of cooperation. I recently took part on a research on diamond open access coalition, which by the way was published last week. And in this study, we discovered that there is this model, the diamond model, it is just big, is widely set in different countries, and well, not only in the Latin American ones, but we need cooperation. And this is, we do this very, very fast, all non-commercial initiatives and infrastructure. I mean, many commercial corporations really join or work together in order to, in an alliance, maybe control quality or different strategies to position themselves. But we are not doing the same in the non-commercial sector. We need cooperation. So I just want to lay this on the table and offer our availability to cooperate with all of you, because I think in order to be stronger as and not to be considered as an alternative model, but as the facto in model, we need to cooperate and collaborate. So I think it is a big error, for example, that many non-commercial initiatives are collaborating with commercial corporations, for example, Elsevier or Clarivate Analytics and so on. But we don't cooperate with each other in the non-commercial sector. We can cooperate in terms of quality control, in terms of technology, in terms of sustainability, on sharing resources to make tasks easier and more sustainable. So I just want to bring this issue of cooperation.
Thank you very much. And I think we have 1 minute left here of our allotted time. I think that was a very nice ending point for the roundtable discussion. So thank you very much, Ariana. We touched upon aspects around infrastructure, tools and systems, research culture, research assessment systems, and also some legal conditions. And I really like the final point around the importance of cooperation, especially in non-commercial platforms and initiatives that are happening led by the scholarly community. So with that, let me thank all our panelists, so Abel Packer, Bianca Amaro, Mikael Arentoft, Sara de Rijke, Ariana Becquerel Garcia. This has been a pleasure to have you here and to host this roundtable. And I really hope that we get to engage and cooperate more in the future. So from my side, to all the listeners as well, thank you very much for attending this session. And I will hand back now to Gledson.
Okay, Matthias, thank you very much for the excellent moderation. When I planned this session, I planned this session because I was feeling that we were lacking the discussion or the inclusion of the Latin America point of view as well on the open science discussions on our policy working group and in our other European platforms. So I'm very happy by the output of the session. We had really good discussion about this and the importance of collaboration and how to advance the open science further. So I'd like to thank all the speakers. Many thanks for your time, for your contribution. And we hope we can collaborate in the future, and we are in the MCAA Alumni Association in the Latin American chapters. We are always open for collaborations and for help. So so in this way, I would like to conclude this session. Just a reminder of the sessions of today and the rest of the conference. So today in 1 hour, we are going to have a roundtable on geodiversity and UNESCO Global Geoparks. Tomorrow, we have a workshop for Marie Sklodowska-Curie individual fellows, a practical workshop. And to close the conference on Friday, we have 2 roundtables. One, improving visibility of women in STEM, strategies is success stories. And the last roundtable, how to improve networking and collaboration for Latin America researchers in COVID time. These 2 roundtables are organized by the Argentina chapter, and they promise to be a very good discussion, very important discussion, especially now on these disruptions caused by the COVID, on the way we do and we move and do our scientific collaborations. So thank you all for coming. You can always access our full program on the site MCAA Brazil /Latin21, which is the conference website. And this video will be available in our YouTube channel, in the Euraccess YouTube channel as well. And for those of you, and we are going to advertise it on our media. So thank you very much for all you come, for your time, and I hope you have a nice day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.